Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. During the NATO summit, Ukrainian President Zelensky thanked Prime Minister Trudeau for all of Canada's support as the war with Russia continues. Mortgage rates and the cost of borrowing money is going up as the Bank of Canada raised its policy rate yet again. And at the Premier's Conference in Winnipeg, Danielle Smith explains why she and so many other premiers are frustrated with the Trudeau government.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for Canada's ongoing support for Ukraine during its war with Russia. The two met at the NATO summit in Lithuania. Ukraine has applied to join NATO, but NATO leaders have said Ukraine has some conditions to meet before joining the alliance. They include ending the war with Russia, stamping out corruption, and democratic reform.
Again, thanks for your visit to Ukraine, and thanks for real feeling of all of us, all of our feeling that really Canadians helped Ukraine and helped from the very beginning of full-scale war. We really count on you people, and we are the same, and you know that we fight for the same values. And my appreciation for all your support and your government. Thank you very much. And I'm happy that we have conversation today on the fields of NATO, and we need your support. I'm sure that we'll have it.
Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly reaffirmed Canada's support in having Ukraine join the NATO alliance, but is not sure about a timeline of when that could transpire.
And we are in favor of Ukraine joining NATO when conditions allow. Of course, we all know that there's a war raging right now. So while the war is raging, we'll continue to support Ukrainians fighting for their freedom and ours. We will continue to provide military support, financial support, humanitarian support, and meanwhile, we will be there to address the question of also long-term security guarantees that Ukrainian must have, because even when the war ends, Russia will still be a very dangerous neighbor. We always have said that it is important that we help Ukrainians fight as we speak. Why? Because one day there will be a negotiation table. One day there will be a diplomatic solution to this war, as in any war.
Canada's Defence Minister Anita Anand, who was also at the NATO summit, explained more specifically how our country is supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia.
We are working with Canadian industry in the supplying of material for Ukraine, for example, in the supplying of cameras for drones, in the supply of armored vehicles. Those items are coming from Canadian industry, and we'll continue to work with Canadian industry.
Federal Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan is getting involved in the strike which has shut down BC ports. The minister said the difference between the employers group and the union's positions is not sufficient to justify a continued work stoppage. In a tweet, he says the two sides have a good deal within reach. He asked the federal mediator to send him a recommendation for a settlement within 24 hours. He will then forward to both sides for them to mull over for a day. Around 7,400 members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Canada walked off the job on Canada Day to back demands for higher wages and protections against contracting out and automation. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has spoken out as farmers wait to see if they'll be once again forced to pay the federal government's carbon tax. The private member's bill brought forth by the Tories, exempting farmers from doing so, remains in the Senate. Poilievre says it is Liberal senators who are blocking the Tory bill exempting our farmers from paying the carbon tax. In a tweet, Poilievre said, when he taxes the farmers that make the food and the truckers that ship the food, Trudeau taxes all who buy the food. Axe the tax and bring home affordable food. The Bank of Canada has raised its key interest rate 1/4 point to 5%. That is the highest level since 2001. That means lines of credit will be going up along with mortgage rates once again. The central bank says the move was prompted by elevated demand in the economy, along with strong inflationary pressures. Its updated economic projections suggest it'll take longer to get inflation back to the 2% target.
Underlying inflationary pressures are proving more stubborn. We have made considerable progress in the fight against inflation. CPI inflation has fallen from a peak of 8.1% last summer to 3.4% in May. But even as headline inflation has come down largely as we forecast, underlying inflationary pressures are proving more persistent than we expected. Higher interest rates are needed to slow the growth of demand in the economy and relieve price pressures. Second, we are trying to balance the risks of under and over tightening monetary policy. If we don't do enough now, we'll likely have to do even more later. But if we do too much, we risk making economic conditions unnecessarily painful for everybody.
Now, in response to the Bank of Canada raising its rate to 5%, Canada's big banks raised their prime rate from 6.95% to 7.2%. Charges against two men who attended an Ontario rally against COVID-19 have been dropped. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms says charges against both former MP Derek Sloan and former MPP Randy Hillier were officially withdrawn on June the 29th. Both men attended the No More Lockdowns protest in Stratford, Ontario on April 25th of 2021. Now, at the time, the Ontario government's regulations stated that people were not allowed to gather outdoors during the pandemic. Sloan and Hillier both faced fines of up to $100,000. The prosecutor agreed to drop the charges in exchange for a modest charitable donation or volunteer work. Sloan made a donation while Hillier volunteered at a food bank in Lanark County. The 25-year-old man accused in shooting 9 people in Cleveland, Ohio on Sunday was arrested and made his first court appearance on Thursday. According to the court docket, Jalen Jennings is being charged with attempted murder following the shooting at a bar. Police say Jennings has a long criminal record.
I'm here today to give a positive update about the shooting in the warehouse district we experienced early Sunday morning. Because of the hard work of our police department here in Cleveland and the U.S. Marshals, and also the amazing donation from business owner Bobby George, we have found the suspect.
Today, working with the Marshal Service as well as CPD, our detectives and sergeants assigned to the Marshals Task Force, acting on information that we received, as well as just really hard, dedicated work from our detectives, we were able to locate, we believe, the suspect that was involved in the shooting in this location that we're standing in.
Well, in our location here in southwestern Alberta, we've seen a little bit of rain lately. Jeanette Rocher is actually on location at the Calgary Stampede with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, weather-wise, how is it looking at the greatest outdoor show on earth? And how about for us here in Lethbridge as well?
Well, Hal, here in the Stampede City, we've seen clouds, and we could still see some light showers today and slightly cooler temperatures as well, just above that 20-degree mark. As for the windy city though in Lethbridge, tonight there is a 30% chance of thunder showers developing with a low near 12 degrees. Thursday, more clouds rolling in with a chance of showers once again with a high of 24 expected. As for how the rest of the week is going to be shaping up, well, I will have those details coming up for you later on in the newscast.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Looking forward to seeing my mini donuts from the Stampede. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith spoke at the recent Premier's Conference in Winnipeg. A number of issues are being discussed, including affordability, improving health care, Canada's competitiveness, and economic growth. Smith says many of the premiers are simply frustrated with the federal government, which she says continues to poke its nose where it doesn't belong.
Continues to try to dictate how we operate in our programs and policies, and yet they fail in their areas of jurisdiction. That's what a lot of the conversation is that when the federal government often comes calling with an offer to help, it's meager and it has a lot of strings attached. But meanwhile, we've got a lot of big issues that the federal government needs to deal with. For instance, on the issue of Indigenous health, which is an area where they're completely failing Indigenous communities and supporting them in urban environments, as well as supporting them with the mental health and addiction crisis. And so those are, I think, a couple of the reasons why we're deciding to work towards trying to find some best practices among the provinces, but also push back and make sure that the federal government is meeting its obligations as well.
The Alberta government announced new funding to help industries reduce emissions. Officials say $60 million will be invested to not only help cut emissions, but also to support jobs and the economy. The province will support 14 new projects using the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund. Officials say if all funds and funded projects are deployed, they will reduce a combined 700,000 tons of emissions by the year 2030 and create around 1,700 new jobs. The TIER program helps industrial facilities, which account for more than half of our province's total emissions. Alberta RCMP have arrested 2 people near Redcliffe following a crime spree in which travel trailers and vehicles were stolen here in southern Alberta. Police say the pair stole a couple of trucks and 3 RVs worth around $300,000. The thefts occurred throughout southern Alberta, including in Taber and Dunmore. 32-year-old Travis Douglas Seitz of Brooks and 28-year-old Brooke Ashley Mintz both face a wide range of charges, including possession of stolen property over $5,000. Both suspects were known to police. Seitz will be in court on July 18th, while Mintz will be in court on July the 19th. Officials with the City of Lethbridge say they've been seeing a lot of success with their encampment strategy and response plan. Since the launch of the campaign, they say 311 has received around 156 calls related to the encampments. In mid-June, the city also launched a new online report form that people can use to report encampment issues. Andrew Malcolm, Community and Social Development with the city, explains how that's been going so far.
There have been 56 online reports, so we're seeing about 1/3 of our total volume coming through that online report or that online form, and we expect that number to increase as people become familiar with it. We'll stress that whether you call into 311, use the chat feature on 311, or submit the online form, they're all coming directly to the encampment response team the same way. So we are triaging them in the same order. So one method doesn't get you any quicker to the process, but it allows us to triage it all from one central point.
The city's full encampment strategy can be found on their website. The City of Lethbridge has partnered up with the Lethbridge YMCA and the Slow Your Roll campaign to introduce new harmonized school and playground zones. A special presentation was made at the YMCA to unveil the details. Video journalist Micah Quinn was there to chat with officials about this very important announcement.
Traditional road safety says 3 E's: engineering, enforcement, and education.
The city rolled out the message on Wednesday morning that all school zones in Lethbridge will be converted to year-round playground zones with a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit from 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. New signs will be set up by city staff in the next few weeks at a total cost of $65,000.
One of our projects, we had some surplus money left, capital project, so that was also a signed project. So we are using that money. So there is no new impacts on our city's operating or capital budget.
Over 3 years ago, 10-year-old Charles McIntyre was struck and killed by a vehicle at the Crossings Shopping Centre on the west side of Lethbridge. Now a memorial pays tribute to his life and serves as a reminder of what happened that fateful day. Since its inception, the Slow Your Roll Awareness Group has raised $35,000 for local charities.
Our program has set out not only just looking at the sign and saying, you know what, there could be kids out here, because ultimately these programs and the city's program is aimed at keeping kids safer, and that's what we've been trying to do. So the resistance to change is not so much from a personal feeling, but it's from an absolute avoidance of something that somebody shouldn't have to go through, including yourself, right? And that could be you in that seat.
The new playground zones will come into effect by September 5th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Shakespeare will be in the park once again here in Lethbridge this summer. The Lethbridge Shakespeare Performance Society will be putting on a special 60s themed version of Taming of the Shrew. Staff of the group told us what we can expect.
Well, we have a very creative young director this year, and he is from Winnipeg. His name is Jesse T. Bear, and he chose the play. We give our directors a short list of 3 plays to choose from every year. He chose The Taming of the Shrew, knowing that it can be seen as, quote, a problem play because of some of the misogyny in it. But he is directing it very sensitively, and he decided to set it in British Columbia in the 1960s. So actually, most of the action takes place in Nanaimo instead of in 17th century Italy.
The play will be located at Galt Gardens throughout the month of July. For more information on the dates, make sure you check out our website. Alberta has become a major centre for film and TV production, and lately, There's been a push to get more of that production here to Lethbridge. As part of the budget process last year, Economic Development Lethbridge proposed an initiative to City Council that would tap more into the entertainment industry to help bring more of that money to our economy.
We've put forward what we thought was a reasonably proactive strategy to bring new investment, to create jobs, to build opportunities in creative industries. We'd like to see Council fund that initiative as we proposed it. But there's only so many tax dollars to go around, and this is an incremental ask, and so Council's doing its due diligence to make those trade-offs. For Lethbridge, I'd like to see us diversify our economy further. This is an industry where we don't play a lot. There's pockets of it happening here. How do we grow that? How do we just create more opportunities for Lethbridge businesses in this space?
Lewington says after Tuesday's council meeting, they've been asked to come up with new ideas and information to present to council in 2 weeks' time. The deadline for small businesses to pay back their pandemic support loans is coming up at the end of the year, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business wants Ottawa to extend that deadline. The Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce says they agree with the CFIB on the request and would like to see the repayment be extended until the end of December of 2025.
One of our concerns is that if some of these businesses fail to meet their current December 31st, 2023 deadline, they lose out on the $20,000 forgivable portion of that loan, which then adds even more to their debt load, even more to the repayments that are going to be necessary. In Lethbridge specifically, 78% of businesses that we surveyed expect their operating expenses to increase this year.
The CFIB says around 20% of business owners are at risk of shutting their doors if the deadline is not extended. Well, Lethbridge has seen a little bit of rain lately, off and on, which is making things nice and green. And there's a slight chance of more showers developing tonight. Full weather details are coming up. We saw a lot of cloud cover and some shower activity in many regions of southern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is on location at the Calgary Stampede grounds and has all of the weather details for us. Jeanette, has the weather been pretty good at the greatest outdoor show on earth? Also, how are things shaping us for us here in Lethbridge?
Yeah, Hal, we've had sunshine mixed with clouds and only spotty shower activity at the grounds so far today. As for Lethbridge, you too have seen a cloudy day with a chance of rain for the most of the day. Tonight, though, there is a chance of another thunder shower developing with a low near 12 degrees. Thursday, there's a 40% chance of showers developing in southwestern Alberta with a high near 24 degrees. The clouds should clear out on Friday as Lethbridge should get up to 25. A nice weekend is shaping up. Expect lots of sunshine on Saturday with a high of 28 degrees, a clear sky, and 29 is on tap for Sunday. Now Monday, it will be partly cloudy with a high of 32. Tuesday, cooling off slightly with a high of 26 expected. Now, looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year in Lethbridge is 25 with an average low of 10 degrees. The highest temperature recorded on this day was 36 degrees. That was set back in 1964, and the coldest day on record was 5 degrees. That happened back in 2008. The sun rose this morning at 5:37 and set at 9:36, giving us almost 16 hours of daylight, just shy. Okay, let's see how the rest of the country is shaping up for Thursday. It should be partly cloudy with a high of 21 in Victoria, mostly sunny and 23 for Vancouver. There's a good chance of rain developing with a high of 25 in Edmonton. Showers and 22 is on tap here in Calgary for the Stampede. Expect sun mixed with clouds and 25 for Regina on Thursday. Clearing and 25 as well for Saskatoon. Now Winnipeg could see a thunderstorm developing at a high of 25 in the central part of the country there. Expect rain and 25 in Toronto, light showers and 25 as well for both Ottawa and Montreal. Now moving over into Atlantic Canada, there's a 30% chance of rain developing at a high of 28 for Fredericton. So expect lots of humidity, mainly sunny and 28 for Halifax. Just a few clouds and 28 as well for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of drizzle with a high near 15 degrees. That's a look at your forecast from the greatest outdoor show on earth, the Calgary Stampede, which wraps up on Sunday night. And just a reminder, be sure to watch for a special Calgary Stampede edition of our weekend newscast.
The Bank of Canada raised its key lending rate to 5%. That's the first time since April of 2001 that the figure hit 5%. The move was expected by economists after Stats Canada released its June labour force survey last week. It showed that Canada added 60,000 jobs last month, which contributed to an overheated economy. Wednesday's rate hike marks the 10th by the central bank since March of 2022. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says robust demand and tight labour markets are causing persistent inflationary pressures in services. The inflation rate is hovering around 3.4%. The central bank wants to see it closer to 2%. In response to the Bank of Canada raising its rate, Canada's big banks raised their prime rate from 6.95 to 7.2%. The Canadian Transportation Agency launched public consultations on its proposed amendments to the Passenger Rights Charter. The changes spell out when an airline would not have to compensate customers, narrowing the field so that most technical issues will no longer give carriers an out. New rules would also let passengers claim a refund if the government raises the risk level to travel to certain countries. It comes after Ottawa passed legislation last month to tighten penalties on airlines, shore up the complaint process, and target flight disruption loopholes. Ottawa is extending the consultation period for the Royal Bank to purchase HSBC Bank following technical difficulties. The issues did not allow the Finance Department to receive the content of some submissions sent by email. Now that the issues have been resolved, Canadians have until July 21st to submit their thoughts about the deal. The $13.5 billion proposed deal announced last November requires approval from the Finance Minister. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 192 points on the day to finish at 20,077. The Dow was up 86 points to 34,347. The S&P 500 was up 32 on the day to 4472, and the Nasdaq was up 158 points to 13,918. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.03 to $75.86 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to $2.63 US. Gold was up 10 cents to $19.5746 US an ounce, and silver was up $1 to $24.12 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.37 per bushel, barley's at $9.32, canola's at $18.07, and corn is at $9.91 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.95 to $176.88. That's for the August contract. Also for the August contract, feeder cattle was down 58 cents to $246.58, and lean hogs were down 10 cents to $101.18. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $75.85 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Bank of Canada has raised its key rate a quarter of a percentage point to 5%. It's the first time it's been that high since 2001. That means lines of credit will be going up along with mortgage rates once again. The central bank says the move was prompted by elevated demand in the economy along with strong inflationary pressures. Its updated economic projections suggest it will take longer to get inflation back to the 2% target. There's a unique Christian organization that reaches kids all around the world with the gospel of Christ. Watch the powerful interview with Moses Esteves from Child Evangelism Fellowship and BCN's Naveen Day in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Street Wheelers Car Club in Lethbridge presents their annual Street Machine Weekend, taking place July 14th to the 16th. Make it a fun family event Friday night as all kinds of vintage, classic, sport, and muscle cars and trucks cruise down Mayor McGrath. Then on Saturday at the Exhibition Park Grandstand, enjoy the loud, raw power of these vehicles as they race for the fastest time in the grand tradition of drag racing. Tickets are $10 per person and those 13 and under are free. Then finish the weekend on Sunday with the ultimate show and shine showcase taking place in downtown Lethbridge at Galt Gardens. So much to see and do at Street Wheelers Street Machine Weekend. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. To book an appointment, call 403-380-6338. And for more information, visit lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Jesus teaches in the Bible to share the gospel with all people around the world, including children. And today's guest certainly thinks so. We're joined by Moses Estevez. He's the Executive Vice President with Child Evangelism Fellowship. Moses, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and Child Evangelism Fellowship, or CEF.
Sure. I was born in Portugal and was saved as a child at age 9. At age 17, I had a calling for ministry. It's a long story how I ended up in the U.S. working with Child Evangelism Fellowship now for 30 years. The ministry of CEF started in the early 20s when our founder, Jesse Overholzer, had a passion from God to evangelize children. The ministry actually got organized in 1937. And he 15 years later, he passed away, and by then we had ministry started in about 60 countries around the world. Today we have about 3,500 full-time staff. We're organized in most nations of the world. We have 400 offices in the USA, and the CEF family, with the help of thousands and thousands of volunteers from local churches, is very busy communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ to the next generation.
Well, that's amazing. Why do you feel that it is absolutely key to share the gospel with children?
Well, we're moved and mobilized by the words of the Lord when he said, "Let the little children come to me." Actually, Psalm 78 has precious verses concerning children where he says that he wants the next generation to hear about the Lord. As a matter of fact, in verse 6, he says that the next generation may know them, the commandments of God, and to know God, the children yet unborn. So he's got a burden. God has a burden for the generation that doesn't even exist yet. And arise and tell them to their children. So now he's talking about two unborn generations, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the work of God and keep his commandments. So as you read through the scriptures, you see just this passion that God has for the children to know him, for the children to worship him and walk with him and experience all the wonderful things God has for them. That comes clearly in the scriptures, especially Matthew 18:14, that said, "It is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish." So God desires children to know him.
Now, kids are really impressionable, and I think that's a big reason why we should be reaching children. But what would you say to those who may argue that it isn't acceptable to present religious teachings to children as they aren't old enough to make these kinds of choices for themselves?
Well, if you look into the scriptures, you actually see a moment when that happened, when Jesus had children around him and he was ministering to them, and the disciples showed up and began to shoo the children away. And Jesus said, no, let them come to me. So God desires for us to minister to children at a young age. Children at a young age have a very open heart to God. And, the backpack of sin hasn't been filled up yet, as it happens when the years go on and into adulthood and the hearts become seared. Children have hungry hearts for God. You tell them the truths of God, of the gospel, and most of them readily accept and believe. They have tender hearts. As a matter of fact, the Lord says that for anybody to be saved, they need to become such as a child, which we jokingly say that all evangelism is child evangelism in that sense.
Now, you have a very ambitious goal, Moses. You want to reach 100 million children per year with the gospel. So tell us, how many children have you reached so far, and in how many countries?
Sure. We have the ministry organized in most nations of the world. So we have a massive structure in place. again, 400 officers in the USA, and we've been doing this since the 1930s. And in 2019, so that was the year before COVID, we reached 25.5 million children with the gospel. And 92% of these, 93% of these are face-to-face ministries, a trained teacher with literature, CF literature, ministering to children in a small group or large group of children. And of course, COVID was a real problem for face-to-face ministries like ours. And so after COVID, we've been rebuilding the work. And of course, some countries got devastated by COVID. Last ministry year in 22, we were able to minister to 19.5 million children. And so we're on our way to grow that rapidly. Think of your vehicle with multiple accelerators. We have a lot of these things in place, the tested programs, the expertise, the workers, the organizational structure. So we're accelerating different things like Good News Club, which is our weekly Bible club that we hold in schools and many other locations. We're accelerating a Christmas outreach that we do that's unbelievable. The kids love to come to Christmas parties and hear the true meaning of Christmas. We're accelerating, for example, children reaching children. You take the older kids, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, that are Christians and committed to the Lord, and you take them aside and you train them how to share the gospel. And watch out, because we're doing that in several places around the world. We're accelerating, and they go out boldly telling the story of Jesus and sharing the gospel with their friends. You know, sometimes adults are a little hesitant. Well, kids are not. They're very bold. And so I'm also excited about that. Can you imagine the new generation of evangelists that are going to come out of this effort for the body of Christ, for the church around the world? So there's many different things we're accelerating to allow us to get to 100 million a year or per year of children reached around the world.
So tell us more about your plan to do this, like how you go about reaching that many children. Because I understand that you have trained over 400,000 teachers?
Yes, we have very strong training programs, and some are shorter, some are longer, all the way to 3 months. And we have the entire structure set up around the world. And so we're constantly training believers to minister to children. Many of them come to us not knowing what to do with kids spiritually. And when they complete their training, they're ready to explain the Bible, share the gospel, counsel them for the salvation. It's a wonderful, wonderful training. So that all is in place. For example, we have a program that we call SPAN, Sponsor and National. Currently, we have 1,378 field workers around the world on SPAN. None of these are in developed nations. None of these are in developed nations. They are in nations that are being developed. And so where it's very hard to raise support. And they're wonderful people. They are trained. And of course, we have to raise a lot of money every month to provide funds to these workers around the world. And if the Lord provides additional funding, we want to double that number. It's costing us about $270,000 a month to fund those workers. And we have to raise that constantly. But if God doubles that, we'll double the number of workers. Many a times these workers are volunteers and they have their jobs. And if we were able to hire sometimes $250, $300, $400 a month, hires a worker full-time, and then they go out and literally reach thousands of children every year. So all the pieces are in place, the strategy, the programs. We just need to hit certain accelerators to grow this exponentially.
And where do you find these teachers from? If they have regular daytime jobs, who are they, and where do you recruit them from?
So all over the world, also in Canada and USA, for every CEF staff member, there's typically hundreds of teachers and volunteers involved in different capacities. So CEF is a very heavy volunteer base organization. And those individuals, those volunteers, are constantly receiving training that we provide, all kinds of levels of training. And so when there is funding available to turn around and hire additional staff, it's very easy to go to our pool of volunteers and challenge them to pray and consider serving the Lord full-time. So we don't lack the people, we lack the finances a lot of times, but God has given us a very large crowd of gifted volunteers that are passionate about children that are willing to step into full-time ministry.
Now, you mentioned several countries that you're working in. Is CEF working in countries impacted by war, such as Ukraine?
Yes, we are. We actually, our two largest ministries in Europe, we have about 601 staff in Europe, and we have the region divided with 48 countries. And so we have about, I would say the largest two ministries in Europe are Russia and Ukraine, where we have the largest number of staff and where the largest number of children are reached. So we have about 69, 70 full-time staff in Ukraine. About 6 of them are outside of Ukraine. They had to leave because of the war. And so they're ministering to the multitudes of refugees from Ukraine. The rest, the majority of them are all in Ukraine ministering. We constantly make trips in there from CEF of Poland, from CEF of Romania, to bring supplies, to bring gospel literature, to bring everything you could think they need, including generators and so on, so they can minister, so they can serve. And the ministry they're doing is unbelievable. We get stories all the time of some of them we heard recently. They're near the front where the war is, and so these two teachers, these two staff, when they go out to teach clubs with the children, they with all the resources they need to pack for the club, they also bring bulletproof vests, because they're near the front. And so many times when those missiles come, the fire alarm, the alarms in the cities go off. By law, they have to stop what they're doing and run to the basements, to the bomb shelters. And as soon as they get back into the basement, they continue the Bible lesson or continue the club hour. And the kids are eager to continue learning about God. So God is doing a great ministry, actually in both countries, even though this is such a nasty, such an evil situation, this war.
That's just amazing to hear. And it's just such a different world out there, like learning the gospel when there's missiles falling all around you. But now tell us about the Good News Clubs, which are part of your American efforts, because I also understand that you now also have these Good News Clubs in Canadian schools as well.
Yes. So the Good News Club is the ministry, it's sort of the flagship ministry of CEF. There are weekly Bible clubs that happen through the school year. We do them around the world. I think we have about 79,000 around the world in a given year, and it's growing all the time. In 2001, June 2001, the United States Supreme Court had made a decision on a vote 6-3 that it was constitutional for CEF to have Good News Clubs in public schools. So we have had thousands and thousands of schools with clubs, and we continue to grow that ministry. And I believe that also in Canada, there are opportunities, especially in Manitoba, for schools to open up for Bible clubs on a weekly basis.
Now, you mentioned the Supreme Court. Obviously, like things can kind of escalate with challenges because our society is becoming increasingly secular. So tell us about some of the challenges you do come across.
Some of the challenges with those school clubs is sometimes the principal or the superintendent don't want the club in there. And so they give us the runaround, and we're very gracious and patient with them and say, hey, look at the decision of the Supreme Court. If you open the school for these other groups, then you cannot exclude CEF just because we teach the Bible. Most of the time they open the door. Every so often it requires Liberty Counsel, a group of Christian attorneys that we work with, to write a letter, attorney to attorney letter. Most of the time that letter unlocks that resistance, but every so often there's principals or superintendents that dig their heels and say, no, you won't come. And in those situations, we'll file a lawsuit. We have one right now in a school district in Rhode Island. After 2 years of waiting and asking for them to open the facility and them saying no to us and allowing other groups to open. So that lawsuit is going on right now. Again, we're not filing a lawsuit for money. We just want the right to be treated like other groups. Other attacks that we've received that have come over the recent years, I would say the last 8, 9 years, 7, 8, 9 years from atheist groups. They attack us in a variety of ways. More recently, the Satan clubs, which are basically atheists trying to create a big splash in the community with their, scary Satan clubs to force the school leadership and the community to push them out. And in order to push them out legally, they have to push out our club. That's their strategy. Is nothing but another attempt, because they've been at this for a number of years now. It's another attempt at pushing Bible clubs out, like the Good News Club. And that's basically what's happening. But in all these cases, our Good News Clubs just keep growing. I mean, God has kept the doors open, and people that learn about the opportunity to teach the Bible in public schools, they get fired up, and they get behind us and support us. And it's a wonderful thing to see what God is doing.
I had no idea that was part of a strategy to get Christian groups out. That's really interesting that you mentioned that. I'd never thought of it that way. Moses, so we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your interest. I invite the viewers to go to cfonline.com and check out where the closest CF office is to where they live and get involved.
Moses Estevez is the Executive Vice President of Child Evangelism Fellowship.
Well, anyone who's had kids knows that every so often you need a little support. Sometimes we just need some advice from someone who's been there, or some calming words to stay positive during that morning chaos. Whatever the case may be, there is parental support out there, and it's just a phone call or click away. To discuss the counseling and resources that parents can tap into, I have Meryl Kiani joining me from the Lethbridge Family Center. Meryl, welcome.
Thank you, Jeanette. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I just really want to dive into this. So, I know a lot of parents might not know about the Family Center. So what is it and what does it do? I mean, when I started researching, to me, it almost seemed like a kid's help phone, but for parents in a way.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So Family Center is there to provide that prevention and early intervention programming and resources to Lethbridge families and all the caregivers and children, that to build those resiliency skills and be able to provide them with the tools and the support that's needed to thrive in the future. So we have a variety of different programming and support out there. We have drop-in play programs where it builds that social connection, working on executive functioning skills, building those skills that are really needed, the soft skills for the children, but as well as providing that social connection for families and parents and caregivers that need that, especially after COVID, building that relationship back up. We have more sort of targeted programs where, a parent might need that one-on-one parent support about a specific thing that they're experiencing, whether it's, disobedience of a child, or whether it's just an extra little support about bedtime routines. We have parent support for that. So parent support coaches are able to help navigate that situation. We also do registered programs. Those registered programs, things like Baby Splat or a Splat program, or our Baby Gym Time. Those are registered programs where, again, it focuses on those resiliency building, on those executive functioning skills, builds that social connection for parents and caregivers, and gives those tools for them to thrive in the future.
That's amazing. It's such a needed resource. It sounds like you have so much going on there under the roof. I mean, we see it there at the Melcor Center. Most of us don't know what you guys do, and it's nice to know that it's not just for parents. Kids can actually tap into this as well, right? Like if a youth or other family members find themselves in need, there's so many services for them to tap into. So what's the best way, if someone needs help, like what's the best way for them to access it? Is it online? Is it by calling you?
Yes, absolutely. So there's various different ways of connecting with Family Center. On our website, there's all of our programs. What I just highlighted were just a few. We have variety of different programs for whatever the need of the family is. We also have Indigenous programming where it's targeting for the for Indigenous families and really focusing on the Blackfoot culture and bringing Blackfoot culture into the youth's lives as well as the families, working with our elders and being able to support that way. Our website has a really great way of having our program guide where it lists when the programs start, how many weeks they are, how is the registration. So website's a great place to get resources, as well as calling us. Calling our number, our front staff are ready and happy to support families. For those who need an extra little support where they don't know what is it that their family needs. We have a dedicated staff called a family connector. So our family connector is our system navigator, where they're able to do an interview process with the family and see really what are your needs right now, what are the priorities, and be able to support whether it's within Family Center or external to Family Center, being able to support and provide that wraparound service for families. So I would say our website as well as our phone number is the best way to connect with us. Our number is 403-320-4232, and that will connect it to our main reception, and then they can navigate through that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And you mentioned so many programs there, counseling, there's the coaching, all of that. Even if just the parent has to come in for assessment, do you offer childcare on the spot there as well?
Well, some of our programming, we do partner, we do have casual childcare providers that if there's a registered play program or a program, then the children can be under a care while the parents go through that program. We're not a childcare center ourselves, but we'll remove barriers for families as best as we can. And with our counseling, we used to have in-house free counseling support. Unfortunately, with loss of funding, we lost that department. However, we have a private funder that has given us subsidized funds that we are able to support families, and we have partnered with 3 private counselors on site at our Melcor Center and be able to refer families that fit that criteria for counseling. Our 2 other locations on the north side as well as on the west side at Coalbanks Elementary, they do very much similar programming. Well, the west side does very much similar registered programming as our downtown. Our north side, which is located at Interfaith Food Bank, does a lot of that cooking, building social connection through the cooking programs and teaching where that comes from.
I love that. So you've got multiple locations. Meryl, what is the history of the Family Center? How did it begin?
Family Center started actually about 40 years ago, and it was an amalgamation between two agency, sort of like a parent place, and then it transitioned into being a family center. And it's just that the needs for building those skills and resiliency building in our children and supporting families, because the future and that prevention is really key in making sure that our community doesn't have intense intervention down the road. So a lot of our programs and the history of Family Center really does focus on that, on the skills side and building those skills in families and in children. But with the integration of the brain story, all of our staff are brain story certified, and all of our programs incorporate the brain story model and how brain is sort of an architecture, the brain architecture, and how you have to build support and build tools into making them resilient and kind of removing those toxic stresses and navigating that air traffic flow of the brain for parents, for children, and that's really key. And that's how Family Center has started, is building connections, building resources for families for the future of the community, because we know that intervention is a reality, and intervention is a reality in many communities, especially in Lethbridge. However, by building in our families and our children and really focusing on that prevention, we can limit the amount of intense intervention that we will have down the road.
Wow. Now, I understand that you have maybe a little bit of a partnership with Alberta Health Services.
Yeah, we do have, we are a FRN, so Family Resource Network is a model through the province, and Lethbridge, in Lethbridge, Family Centre is the hub, and we have 2 spokes internally. However, we partner with many agencies, and we have other spokes that partner with us through this FRN model. So we have AHS as one of our partners. We have Lethbridge Family Services, their counseling as one of our spokes. McMahon, the family preservation workers, as one of our spokes. We have parents as teachers, home visitation as one of our spokes, and Lethbridge School Division, what was called Making Connections, as one of us spokes as well. So we partner on a regular basis through the FRN model, but Family Centre does have a vast list of partners throughout the community, and we with different programs throughout the year to make sure the families kind of get that support that they need and the resources that they need.
Definitely. And you're talking about spokes, almost like I'm picturing a bicycle spokes, like everything coming together to make it work, right?
Yes. And as an FRN, as the hub and as the FRN network, the purpose is to be able to provide that wraparound service. So be able to actually look at a family as a unit and see what are their needs, and as different agencies filling those gaps and being able to support that family or support that child.
Yeah. Now with AHS, I'm kind of envisioning it being like an educational component there.
Within the FRN model, it's the home visitation or families first. So kind of that specific target population. But we do partner with AHS often about that education piece as well. Yes, we have a lot of resources. We bring in different resources for our different programs that families can utilize, as well as refer our families to the resources through AHS as well. One example is we have a very new program called Babes on the Milky Way. And it's a lactation support group. And it was just because the need was really big in Lethbridge, and that support network and the lactation support group for new moms or expecting moms. How we partnered with lactation nurses and being able to bring them in and have them educate or provide support to moms, the new moms that are struggling, or moms that are, needing that extra information. Being able to work with dietitians through Alberta Health Services and bringing them in to provide those resources. We really like to, what we want to focus is to make those connections. So really make those connections for families to the programs or the resources that are out there.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm imagining that this is free of charge to your clients, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
And Morel, what have you been seeing as the major needs? What are the major needs and issues facing kids and families here in Lethbridge?
Yeah, so one of the biggest sort of transition or trends that we have seen is families and parents that need support through separation and divorce. That has actually, our calls have really increased after and during COVID. And so there's a lot of programs that are out there that Family Centre does provide those support for parents that are going through that transition. But it's not just the parent that needs that support, it's also the child that's kind of going through that transition as well. So we offer programming, we offer Rainbows program. So it's a grief and loss program that can support the child to transition through this hard times within their family. So those are the increase in needs that we have seen. We've also seen an increase in calls, a little more distress calls. So calls that are a little more at a heightened level than in the past. So our family connector does her best to be able to navigate through that, do the intake process, and be able to provide them with support. We have had to provide the crisis line for a number of those calls, and we've really seen that trend. And housing has become an issue or a barrier as well. So the trends are that we really, really need to move into this prevention really need to inform the community and the families to utilize the programs and services that are out there so that we don't have these calls down the road and so that we can mitigate them.
Yeah. Are you able to share any success stories with us?
We have specific dad programs and really focusing on that because that father figure role is really important in the child's development. And so those success stories of seeing dads who use worry dragons, it's a program that, kids go through and they identify their dragons and are able to cope with them by learning coping mechanisms or mitigating them. But now that a dad and their little one have been in stores and they're identifying. They're kind of looking at people and going, "Ooh, that person's dragon is bigger than this person," or "Ooh, that person has their dragon under control." So it's actually built this connection between the dad and the child to be able to do that. So it's a really great way of seeing our programs implemented in the community.
I think that's wonderful because it seems like there are so many resources out there for moms, but a lot of times dads get kind of forgotten about in the mix, don't they?
Yes, they do, and we have been focusing more this year as we had our funding through Lethbridge Tim Hortons owners and through the Smile Cookie campaign that was really geared and dedicated towards our dad programming. So we've had a number of dad programs that have come up and they have been full, and it's been amazing to see that relationship and that connection between dads and their kids.
Awesome. Well, you are a nonprofit, so I'm sure you look for donations as well. If people want more information, where can they go?
Absolutely. So our website is the best place to go. We are always looking for donors, supporters, but we also love our volunteers as well. So our website is the best place to go, and there's information about how to donate, how to volunteer, and connecting with us. And I always encourage people to connect with me directly as well, and I can give them more information about where they want to support, which program, which area, and where do they want their dollars to go.
That's amazing. It looks like we are about out of time here, but thank you so much, Morel, for sharing with us all about the Lethbridge Family Center and the mission of it. It's wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. That was Morel Kiani, Executive Director of the Lethbridge Family Center. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.